Welcome to Public Comment. I'm John Dunbar, former mayor of Yountville.
And I'm Alfredo Pedroza, farmer.
And I'm Kate Miller, the former executive director of the Napa Valley Transportation Authority and current board member at Napa Valley Vine Trail and Riverline.
So Kate's already shown off. We're talking today about politics, people, and whatever else Kate wants.
We're better off when we act as one.
This is not a big enough community to divide.
When you're trying to compete for dollars, you have all these other communities doing the same thing.
People have sometimes short attention spans for the benefits that we are now enjoying.
All right, welcome to Disclosures. This is making John very uncomfortable because we're out of sequence.
It's unstructured.
I'm going to kick off this news, disclosure segment, John. So what's on your mind? What's new?
I will say, since we're about to go in and hear from an expert on transportation, I live out in Browns Valley, and there's been significant work on Browns Valley Road, and most of it's really good. It's progress, adding sidewalks and repaving, restriping.
The new bike lane, though, it's throwing me off.
My concern is there's so much happening. It's a very new look, and I know that this is happening in other parts of the city. But not only are you restriping, and I'm glad that we now have whistles to go along with the demolition that we can hear across the street, but now we have green rectangles at every driveway that I hope people understand mean there's a driveway. And we have parking away from the curb now because there is safety to have the bike lane against the curb and have a buffer with the parked cars. It looks totally different. And I know that it's also a speed calming, traffic calming intent. But right now, it feels kind of like a cluster.
Well, not only does it feel like a cluster, it looks like a cluster. My barber shop is in your neck of the woods, and I was driving by the other day. I'm like, this is confusing, right? But, I'll tell you, for me, I am a farmer, to be clear. But I also, I'm a consultant and I have some transportation clients, and look, I don't miss being a politician whatsoever, zero. But still being able to be involved in policy, John, and seeing some of the things that are happening in the region, right? And I'm going to be on BART tomorrow, because I got to go to the Bay Area. It reminds me of how critical it still is, right? And yes, we're in Napa, and you think about, when are you going to be on BART? You do, right? And it's so in your face right now, right? Because we haven't recovered from the pandemic, right? And we're in front of a construction site. There's money being poured in. We're having a glass of wine. But the impacts of the pandemic are still here, right? And you have transit operators, right? They're talking about if they don't get emergency funding, John, they're going to face budget deficits, which means the service reductions. Like, imagine what that means to the region, right? So we can talk about our projects here, and we are inside around, delivering Salsco Junction. But it's still a good reminder, though, John, how you need this region to work. Right? If San Francisco doesn't have good transit, if Alameda County doesn't have good transit, that makes Napa Valley harder to get to Napa Valley or people to go to work.
So what are you doing sitting here? Get to work, man.
I am, but let's go inside first.
All right. Alfredo, here we are again with Kate Miller, and we used to do a lot of great things together professionally when we were still electeds, and Kate was running NVTA. So welcome, Kate.
Thank you.
I'd like to start off just having you give us a little bit of a background about you and your career and what brought you to Napa Valley and to leadership here.
I started my transportation planning career working for California Path, which was an arm funded by Caltrans at the University of California, Berkeley, and I worked for a professor, Praveen Varaya. From there, I went on to work for the Metropolitan Transportation Commission.
The best commission.
Yeah. Where Alfredo was the chair for 4 years. I think that's a record.
Yeah.
Not while I was there, but it was a great place to work. I loved it. But I had an opportunity to move on to AC Transit, which is the largest bus-only system, I think, in the country, and certainly one of the biggest systems in the Bay Area. And was there for a little over 5 years. And then this opportunity came along there was an executive director position open. I thought it might be an interesting career shift. I'd been very focused on transit for the most part, except for when I was at California Path. And so it was going to be an interesting way to broaden my career.
Did you know about Napa before, though, Kate?
Oh, of course.
So what was your perception of Napa? Just curious.
Well, I mean, that's my perception of Napa Valley
Besides
was
great wine.
quite a bit different than its governance. I think that, there have been prior executive directors that have played significant roles at the Napa Valley Transportation Authority. At that time, it was Napa County Transportation and Planning Agency.
Can
But
you
I
just
think,
say MVTA? It's shorter, right?
yeah, now it's, but that was the NCTPA,
the name
right?
change. I was there when the name change
And
happened.
branding. Right?
Thank you
We did
both
it.
for doing that.
Yeah.
By the way.
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure if it made a difference, but I think one of the things that happened under my tenure is that the agency really grew up. We had put in place a lot of really important things that government needs, like policies, a structure. We never had a countywide transportation plan. Instead, we, I guess, cut deals with the jurisdictions to determine which projects would move forward in the regional plan. And probably not the most strategic approach. And so I think, the agency is running pretty smoothly now. We passed two sales taxes to really help our local streets and roads. And this most recent one is also going to help, our highway improvements and just reduce congestion in the valley.
I will tell you though, and we were talking about it before because I think we mentioned your name in a podcast. The amount of roads they're paving, it's freaking awesome.
Yeah.
Highway 29 and then Jefferson Street. So whoever's doing it, I think it was your leadership, but they laid the groundwork for a lot of work. But I think what would be great to share, Kate, is for someone that's listening in and they hear about transportation, they hear about, NVTCA. Sorry, now I'm confused myself. But what does the organization do? Just kind of high level.
Yeah, I mean, its primary responsibility is to prioritize projects and programs over long periods of time. So planning, that's their planning effort, and coordinating that with the local city and county jurisdictions. Also to coordinate highway improvements with Caltrans. It does administer, as I mentioned, the sales tax. For local streets and roads and highway improvements. And then it also manages and oversees the transit system. And the transit system is really one of our unsung.
And that's the bus system.
And I think
benefits here.
Sorry, but that's something that really has
And
evolved.
we drink all the time, Kate, on this podcast.
I wanted to make sure you had a chance to take a sip. There needed to be some focus. When I first joined the board, it was a long time ago, for at least a dozen years, but there needed to be more focus, and that happened over time. But also one of the things that's challenging is having the general public understand it isn't just buses. There are so many more projects that have happened, and it's also important that people see them, because a lot of these projects are multi-year, many years in the making, like Soskel Junction, for example, and people don't necessarily have the patience to see the results. And when you're building tens of millions of dollars in a bunch of different funding sources and planning and engineering and all of those things, people need to understand it takes a long time, takes a lot of coordination. And you were really in the middle of a lot of major projects during your 13 years?
13 years, yeah.
You read your bio, Kate, by the way.
Just a refresh. I wanted to figure out how many, because I started as mayor in 2010 and you joined in 2012. So we were working together for a very long time.
Yeah.
Maybe one of the questions for Kate, because I remember when I got involved in government service, it was the first body that had electeds from different regions. And that was different.
Every jurisdiction is represented by a couple different electeds.
But MVTA was kind of the first body that said, you have mayors, you have council members, you have supervisors. And that was kind of a big deal for Napa County, right? But you were one of the few electeds one of the few, executive directors that had to deal with electeds from different communities. So how was that like? Kind of give us a behind the scenes view of having to work with mayors, some mayors.
We know your favorites.
No one is going to ask that question.
That.
But how was that, right? Because that's unique.
Well, that is, I think, the ongoing benefit and challenge sometimes of NVTA or any sort of regional governance.
She sounds like a politician.
Because, it's an opportunity for elected officials to work together.
Yeah.
And I would say for a very long time that occurred where there was an interest in serving the larger interest of the public, right? As opposed to only wanting to serve your jurisdiction. And I see sort of a trend recently is it being a little bit more provincial and not
Keeping score.
yeah, and it's not, I don't think it's a good thing. I mean, I think there's an opportunity for coordination and working together as that regional body being able to do that. And instead, I think sometimes they can lose their way. And, I think a perfect example of that is towards the end of passing Measure U, the city had an interest in also passing a Measure J, right?
The
Uh,
slush fund. I call it the slush
yeah,
fund. But
so
yeah.
Measure J, and NVTA and the board and its staff had
Yeah.
been working on that. Actually, John, when you were still on
Yeah.
the board, so for probably 4 years, and I didn't necessarily see the city's effort as being a conflict, but I think they sure did, and it ended up creating a lot of political infighting. And
Yeah.
the unfortunate part of that is that they dragged staff into it a little
Yeah.
bit. And in the end, they both passed. It was an unnecessary sort of circumstance, and I think it's also a lesson for us to look to see maybe what we should be doing is really focusing on coordination and building relationships rather than me and mine.
Well, let me ask you a follow-up question because I think, we deal with the elected side, John, we're political animals, but sometimes I think we gloss over when electeds fight or when electeds try to keep score, what it does to staff. Right. And maybe Kate, I think you could maybe give us some color of, because there was times we were on there, right, where it was American Canyon acting up to No Surprise, or I can say that, or Calistoga or St. Helena or Napa. From a
Never
professional,
Yountville.
I was very courteous today, John, but without getting specific, but how would that make your job harder as you're trying to lead? And I think sometimes it's good to just provide context of our unintended consequences on staff when they're put in these positions.
Well, I think the challenge that I felt all the time is that it actually held back progress, and it also, I think staff worked super hard on Measure U, and I don't care. I never cared about the credits that I
Yeah.
got, but the staff itself, if they're not being acknowledged for their hard work, I think that's really hard on them. And I think Measure U is a perfect circumstance. It's sort of passed, and then we just forgot about it. And there was really no general acknowledgement at the board except for by you. And I think at that point you had stepped down,
Yeah.
but and your help on passing that was
Yeah.
really
But
very and also I just want to give a shout out to Liz Alessia,
Yeah.
who also is a real cheerleader for staff, and that does help. It helps us do our job and get our mission done. And yeah, so I'll leave
But
it with that.
it's also difficult for you specifically, but also the entire team at MBTA when you have a dozen bosses and we all prioritize our
not all created
jurisdictions.
equally.
Well, there was a weighted voting system,
That's
so
what I meant.
which was understandable. Me being in the smallest jurisdiction, I was always trying to be a little extra scrappy, but also appreciating that the majority of the population needs certain things, and that means sometimes more money goes to those certain areas, and it's so that we can all together be successful. When there's a project in the south part of the county, it doesn't mean that we've got to find one for the north part of the county. It's where the needs are and where the funding is. So then when you have a dozen different opinions and those board members rotate as they either leave office or they reassign the representatives, there's always that challenging dynamic that you get to herd the cats, and sometimes people are jumping in the middle of a project and funding. And I know I was always asking, where's the gap going to close, in funding? And those things were really difficult sources to find sometimes. So just a lot of moving parts
Yeah.
that people didn't always
And
appreciate.
it'd be good to talk about like project delivery because I think that's something that Kate did well, right? Like the Sasko Junction. But before we go there, John, I do think it's critical because Kate was kind of alluding to it. It has changed, right? The way electeds lead has changed, and it's not criticism; it's just different. But I think part of what we were able to do when we work together, when we have tough votes, we're able to talk to each other. It's like, hey, yes, we don't want to sink more money into the maintenance yard because it's this and that, but you were able to convince us to say this is the right thing to do, and here's why. And I think that's important that we acknowledge that, because elected officials, we were going to use political capital to go defend that vote, but it was the right thing to do long term.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's what's missing right now, is that ability to say, hey, I trust you. I know that it's a tough decision, but I know that in your professional opinion, you're giving me your recommendation. And as elected official, we weigh that out. And it was Chris Canning, we'd bring him in, right? Between the three of us, not that we would talk out of school, right? But we knew when those tough votes had to be had, we were there. But that worked because you understood that relationship as well.
And I would just also say that, it is important to acknowledge the needs of each jurisdiction, but it's really important for us to also understand what the funding trends are. Are we going to get a project that says parallels Highway 29, in St. Helena? Are we going to get funding for that? That would be hugely challenging.
Well, roundabouts we've been talking about for years when we were still in office.
Touching my heart, John.
I know. But those are the kind of projects, again, that take a long time to...
But why, though? I think
sometimes it's funding. Sometimes it's getting multiple property owners.
We have to compete with the large counties around the state a lot of times for funding, or around the country. And that is always a challenge.
But why, though, Kate?
But
being a rural county?
we don't have the population. We just don't compete the same way. Largely, it has to do with the amount of congestion we have. Here, we do have a lot of congestion in context of how large we are, but we don't have a lot of congestion in relationship to, say, Emeryville or San Francisco, and the amount of traffic that has to be moved there.
So what does that mean to a Napa resident?
Yeah, I think one of the things that NVTA does well is builds relationships with the jurisdictions, also the regional agency, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, the state, and the federal government. That's where the money is. Yeah, the state is in Caltrans or Cal STA. And I still, by the way, serve on the Transit Transformation Task Force, which was maybe a 30-member body statewide of officials appointed by the secretary, the state transportation agency. And I'm on that until probably the end of this year when we do a report to the legislature. But those are the kinds of things that leadership and staff leadership has been doing in order to bring those funds to the Valley. Also, to that point, because Alfredo also built those kind of relationships with other members on the commission, those funds flowed to Napa as well for the roundabout.
Well, wasn't it $20 million that we were not going to see unless you got it for us?
Well, look, when we were working on RM3, I remember, Kate, you and I think I was new to the commission, but it was part of working closely together, saying, what's our need? Right. And that's kind of what you're hitting on, John, right? Is how do you make sure that you're building relationships? That one was part of like a Christmas tree, and we got to say, okay, what do we want? It was hard.
Well,
but
don't forget that we got $20 million in highway funds and $20 million in transit funds.
Exactly. The harder ones is when you're fighting, to kind of what Kate was alluding to, like when you're fighting for funding that is not programmed and you're trying to get a program like the $8 million from the roundabout. Now that's hard, right? Because you're having to go and compete with San Jose, San Francisco. And to me, that's where it's really, really difficult, because they have huge needs. Not to say that our needs aren't huge either, right? But that's the intensity and the scale. And I think for someone that's listening, when you're trying to compete for dollars, you have all these other communities doing the same thing. And it's magnified, right?
Yeah, and you were starting to go this direction. I wanted to follow up and continue it, which is, what does this mean to the Napa Valley, Napa County resident? Because in some people's eyes, we have severe congestion. Until you go to almost any neighboring jurisdiction, and that's real congestion. Parking is challenging in some areas like downtown, maybe. But parking is really a challenge when you go to San Francisco, Walnut Creek, and like you were saying, other parts of the Bay Area. But that doesn't mean that we aren't going to still try our best to get funding to manage our challenges, but just to give the challenges some context, because you're going along with a lot of other folks in bigger jurisdictions with significantly larger populations, asking for the same money.
Yeah, and it's all about making sure that we're building our projects and getting them shelf ready for those kinds of funds, like creating those priorities that we know we're going to get funding for. But I think on another note, and I'm going to credit staff at NVTA, specifically Danielle Schmitz and Antonio Honorato on the Regional Measure 3, because what we did was we actually advanced projects with other fund sources, and we were able to capture then the RM3 funds, the $40 million, which we now can use for other projects because we did
Creativity.
Yeah, we did. You know,
I'm
we
gonna
got
drink to that.
we got
Yeah.
approval from the commission to move forward with those projects, and we got a lot of grant funds, and we also, for the maintenance facility, we borrowed at less than 1% from the federal government
remember
to
that.
complete that project.
TIFIA loans. Was
And
it
so
TIFIA?
so now there is, and I'm sure some of it has been spent, but $20 million to enhance the transit system, both from a capital and we can use it for operations, or the agency can. And then another $20 million that is going towards developing the project at the intersection of Jameson Airport and 29.
Nice.
And also the improvements in American Canyon on 29. So that $20 million, with that and the money that we are going to get from Measure U for highway improvements, we'll get those projects shelf ready and ready for getting competitive grant funds outside the region to fund them.
I just wanted to touch on one of those projects you were talking about, the airport, Jameson. So that's the kind of the new, not new, it's a bottleneck that has existed for a long time, and it still does. And
A lot of big focus on it now because everybody's like streaming through Soskel.
well, but that's my point.
Yeah.
Soskel now, people have forgotten already
Right.
that it was a massive choke point until that project came through.
Right.
And now people have sometimes short attention spans
Right.
for the benefits that we are now enjoying, because yes, there's still a challenge down the highway, but if we had never done that Soskel Junction, it would be even worse in multiple locations, like what they're doing with 121 right now, and that, more on the west side of Highway 29.
And I would just say that if we were a Santa Clara County or an Alameda County or one of the big counties in the region, we would have been able to get probably enough money for both those intersections and have them shelf ready at the same time. That would have been the ideal way of doing that, because as a small county, though, we're just never going to get that kind of money. It's just too much. And I would say that if you looked at our population and the amount of grant funds that we got competitive grant funds over the last 10 years, we're sitting pretty.
We're punching above our weight class.
It's amazing,
But
totally.
You mentioned projects, John, and I think we got to put some context to it. So Soskel Junction, Kate, what was the sticker price on that?
$52 million, I want to say.
This new project, what's the sticker price on that?
Well, that's the other thing. So Danielle is pivoting a little. Danielle Schmitz is the person who replaced me as the executive director when I retired. And she smartly is pivoting to see whether or not we can actually do a less expensive project and really move as much traffic. So one of the focuses of that intersection is the southbound left-hand turn lane, right? Coming 29 onto Jameson. Is there a way for us to actually build something that's a lot less expensive? If we were to build a grade separated roundabout kind of configuration similar to Soskel Junction, and we made the improvements at Kelly, because we're going to do both at the same time, or the agency is, it was around $100 million price
$100 million,
tag.
John.
So, but I think it can be
Sounds like
done
a
for
big-
less.
Well, I'm just
so
saying-
anyway, they're
No,
doing
but-
a study now, so it'll be interesting to see what they come up
I
with.
just think it's important to provide context, right? And I think part of it is the elected leaders that are fortunate enough to lead our county today. That's the job. They have to go support staff and find money, shake the tree. Bill Dodd did it when he got Trancas done, right? Part of being on MTC was doing the same
also
thing.
need to remember, Jameson Canyon used to be one lane each way with no safety barrier in the middle.
Keith Caldwell, Senator Dodd and all those folks, Jim Spearing from Solana County, they did a phenomenal job for that.
There have been some very high profile projects that we should all be very thankful for. One of the other areas I wanted to touch on that happened during, I think, our collective tenures was advancing electric vehicles and bringing in more EV buses, which is also a multi-year, multi-million-dollar effort. And so it takes a long time to get them built and to get them paid for. And then we start to see them in our jurisdictions. I know that It was exciting to get a transition from what was a very charming trolley in Yountville, for example, that broke down all the time. It was charming, but you couldn't get it to work. And now there's an electric bus shuttle that shows a commitment to, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, providing comfort, reliability. And we've seen that in some of the other jurisdictions of Valley and through the fleet. And it's leading by example also about being creative, looking to the future.
Well, and looking for grant money. And I'm going to credit, again, Antonio Honorato on that, who's the CEO over at NBTA. That's not his title, but that's more
It might be
recognizable.
now.
That's what he's
Sorry,
doing.
CFO. Sorry,
Yeah.
Chief Financial Officer.
He's a
Sorry,
numbers
Danielle,
guy.
about that. But Tony has been very successful in getting grant money for that, because those buses over their useful life, which are typically 12 years, probably cost about twice as much as a standard clean diesel vehicle. And they're also not operating as well. They're really unpredictable. So while it's great for the
Yeah.
environment, but it is a mandate that the state of California has required agencies to do. At the same time, it has really been a big challenge implementing
Until the
that
power goes
program.
out.
Yeah.
Right. So
Right.
like I want to push back on grant funding because I went down to Santa Clara. Okay, we connected with some folks down there, Tim Hale and others. They're pushing the autonomous vehicles. And I'm like, this is cool. Like we should look at it. And then you go, and I'm not criticizing what they're doing because they're doing their job. They're getting grant funding. But then once you start peeling back the onion of how unsustainable it is, it doesn't make sense, right? So I want to make sure that as we encourage people to pursue grant funding, that it's done in a sustainable manner, right? These autonomous vehicles still have to have a person in them. So the economics are terrible, right? So why are we spending money on things that we know there's no light at the end of the tunnel? When we talk
But
about,
we're talking about electric
no,
vehicles.
well, I'm
Yeah.
going on
Yeah.
that too, because I drove an electric car for a while and we don't have the energy in the grid, right? PG&E can meter electricity back and forth. We know that during power shutoffs, right? And there's so much demand. And to me, that's where it's the right thing to do from an outcome perspective, right? It's part of Plan Bay Area and all those wonderful things. But when you don't have the infrastructure to support it, that's misleading,
Yeah.
right? So what if there is a power shutoff and someone's relying on that bus? I'm not saying it's happening, so I don't want
Well, I
I don't
mean,
want
to
folks
your-
to lose confidence.
To your point, the grid infrastructure in
That's-
general needs to be upgraded, because right now it can't even accommodate all of the natural energy that's being generated
Correct.
through solar panels.
That's my whole point.
Right. We at NVTA, they had put solar panels on the parking lot, over the parking lot, over the building. And it's really enough to just power the facility. It's not enough to actually charge all of the vehicles. One of the things I know that Rebecca Shank, who's the transit manager at NVTA, does a great job, understands this way beyond me, is looking to, source ways to store batteries so that when PG&E shuts it down, because they have not qualified transit systems as,
Essential.
as essential first responders, which we are during fires.
You've done it.
Yeah, it's a problem. So she is looking for resources to build, some sort of battery storage facility. And at the same time, they could also build a highway operations center, which would provide emergency signage along the highways so that we don't have the problem during an emergency fire of evacuating people safely out of the valley. The signs would tell people, go this way, go that way. It could also start separating traffic to reduce congestion as people are trying to get out. And I think about, the fire.
It's 2017.
Yeah. That
That's
it just
Weren't
was
you doing
that. And also, I'm blanking on the name of the little city that pretty much burned down, and the people
Paradise.
people got stuck on the highway there.
Oof.
And it was a very scary situation. I don't want that to happen in
Yeah.
Napa. So those are some of the things that NVTA is still working on. But I just also wanted to just point to the fact that NVTA is, as a regional agency, provides the structure to improve the coordination and collaboration between the jurisdictions, to build leadership so that we can actually, we're, as you know, in a situation right now where the wine industry is going to start suffering a little bit. And that is it's a second,
Not today, Kate.
it-
I'm gonna keep
our
drinking
number
till-
one industry is hospitality and then wine. But we need to come up with, other things for tourists to do when they come up here. And we need to have that kind of leadership. And I think that's the reason why I joined the Riverline Board, and we can talk about that a little bit, and also Napa Valley
Before
Vine
you-
Trail, because those two, that actually brings a different kind of tourist up here, and maybe fits the kind of direction that a lot of people are going. People aren't drinking as much. I'm going to go.
To your part, Kate.
Yeah, I'm
You
going
gotta
to
try
call out
harder.
to Saintsbury. I have a tasting appointment with some friends who are going to be here at 3:00. So yeah, to that point though, I think it's important now for us to count on our leaders to create a vision that is, maybe pivoting a little bit from what we've always relied on.
I want to see more forward thinking and more visionary effort out of the leadership that's around the valley right now, because we saw, for example,
Elected?
Chris Canning, when he was mayor in Calistoga, tried out this commuter bus program and tried to get some of the larger employers to subsidize their employee rideshare, basically, is what it was years ago.
Yeah.
And there wasn't the interest or the money to support it. But he was at least having a vision and an idea, trying something different. And I know that we went down and looked at the electric autonomous little
Bishop
taxis.
Ranch.
Bishop Ranch. And it never followed through, but at least we were looking at ways to solve some issues and do it creatively. But that takes people that have a vision and also a collective effort, not just what's happening in Yountville or St. Helena or Calistoga, but it has to be all of them together.
I agree with you. I think we really do need to focus on how we can improve transportation. But a part of our problem is housing. And we're not even building housing for our young families to stay here.
That's a whole nother episode.
Well, and it's not sustainable what we're doing, right? We need to be able to find ways to keep younger people here. The community is getting very old, very fast. And part of that is
she was not looking at me when she said that.
Affordable housing, keeping young families here, building housing for our workforce. Those things are something that we really need to put an effort into. And I think the Riverline
so you mentioned,
the Riverline, the city did a plan, and it was really well done, but it's really it really needs some refinement.
So what is
so the Riverline, largely driven by Steve Carlin, and there's a who's who of on this board, and I am just thrilled and flattered as all get out that they want me to participate on it. It's the multi-use path between Trancas and Imola along the river, but it's also all the economic development, all the building and other things associated with how do we make this a real destination for visitors and also
more interactive.
Even more important for the people who live here, getting them outside, providing other things for them to do, really making it part of the fabric of Napa, which we don't. It's this nice river. I mean, I kind of see it as when we did the bypass, it really changed the downtown area and really fostered a bunch of economic development. We have that same opportunity with the Riverline and the Vine Trail. Let's do it. Let's get our leaders to really support this effort, and let's start putting money into it. I love the fact that we have citizens in this community who are willing to stand up and meet that gap, but we need a collective effort.
But you're highlighting a really good example of the fact that there are a lot of really great projects that have a lot of value and benefit to Napa Valley. We can't do them all at the same time. There is not enough funding for all of them. So we still need to prioritize what is the largest value and benefit, and what can we practically do versus what we would love to see happen, but it's really not realistic. And I'm not calling out any particular project, but it's important that we kind of respect all the different priorities that are throughout the valley. I remember the bypass was principally to support downtown Napa. It was flooding almost every year, but the entire county supported that effort because it was important. So it's good that you have her phone going off, so you get a
Mine did too.
free break.
That was my phone?
Yeah.
But that was an example of a high priority. We could have all said, "Oh, that's the city of Napa's issue. Deal with it."
Didn't they get like 64 cents of every dollar for that?
Yeah,
But-
but your point made, right? Like
Yeah.
the valley got together and did that, right? Everybody benefited from that. We don't have flooding anymore. I mean, knock on wood, at least to the
It's
point
controlled.
what we did.
It's
Exactly.
now,
Yeah.
and so there isn't the economic disaster that there used to be. But it's also it's complicated, right? I mean, there are a lot of moving parts. There are a lot of priorities, and folks up valley have different priorities than folks down valley, and there's always that little bit of friction because
But when-
everybody wants to
yeah.
have priorities met, right? I mean, this
hear
goes
what
back
you're
to
saying, but when one jurisdiction benefits, we all benefit. This is not a big enough community to divide and conquer.
But
We
No,
need to
but
we're all
together.
agreeing
Yeah.
about that. It's
Yeah.
how you get there
Yeah.
is sometimes
But
the
I think we're
challenge.
seeing, it's a different time though, right? I hear what you're both saying, but when flood control happened, right, Jill Tecco was going up to DC to advocate for it. She was using political capital to get that project over the finish line. It took a partnership of staff, right, and elected officials to carry projects. And it's just different, John. Like, Measure U, when we were trying to do that, right, there was so much, trying to figure out, well, what's in it for me?
Right.
And I think it's a different time. And I think we have to go through that, unfortunately, to understand that we're better off when we act as one, right? And it's, not just because he was here, Sheriff Robertson, but he would always say we're one team. We freaking are one team, right? We're a small
Well,
community.
And
We
I
do
listened.
that in
I listened
disasters.
to. Sorry,
We-
John.
sorry.
But I listened
Okay.
to that podcast this morning with John.
Beautiful.
And one of the things that prompted me to think about the earthquake and the fire in 2017 in particular, it was disarray and unorganized, and we're way better at
Yeah.
responding to these kinds of emergencies. But one of the things that happens is the community really comes together. There's nobody trashing each other on social media or fighting over money or being snarky behind people's back. It was a community that came together for a single purpose. So how can we build on that? Maybe it's a project, maybe it's not. What is it?
That's exactly the point I was going to make. And we saw it again during COVID.
So Kate made
And-
it for you.
Yes, she did. She said it better than I would have. But it is kind of that call to action to be a unified leadership, and like Sheriff Robertson did say, one team, and we see it in those times of greatest need, and we should see it every day.
One team, one group. Leave your egos
Yeah.
at home. I think John is a perfect example of that in his leadership, especially in the 2017
Let's
fires.
not give him
when
so
it
much
would have been-
credit.
yeah.
He's gonna love this. But I do want to ask you a question because we're talking about leadership. Okay, and I think you were someone that was leading for a long time, right? And I think it would be great to talk about what was that like for you, right? To be a leader of a transit organization, right? And a time transportation that maybe wasn't, something you saw often. So what was that like for you?
I think leadership is kind of a squishy topic, right? And I think it means something different for everybody, and everybody sort of does it differently. For me, it was about building relationships. It was about empowering staff to do the right thing, and to really set the culture so that they knew what to do when I wasn't there. And that team is amazing, and they're still amazing. And maybe I wasn't even needed. I don't know.
Well, I think you were.
But it is. But that, I think, is what it's about, right? It's like making sure that the people that work for you have the resources they need to do their jobs and to do it well. And then, to John's point, I was out building relationships, but I also encourage staff to do that. Relationships are the key foundation for any.
But I want to commend you on that though, right? Because I think it was also, I think you made electeds better, right? Where we had a chance to do some trips to DC and other places, and it was like, we better do our fucking homework though, right? Like if we're going to go and represent Napa, we have to know our stuff, right? And it was this, I knew that you knew your stuff, and I was like, man, if Kate's going to know it, I got to know it too, because we were there representing Napa Valley. And to me, it was this kind of mutual accountability. And I think that's the way it should be, right? Because I knew that if I did my stuff and I did my homework, you were going to be there and increase the probability of us being successful in whatever the pitch was. And I think I don't want to lose sight of that because you were talking about what you did with staff, but you also had a tremendous impact on electeds too.
Well, and I would like to, because we need to wrap up here,
John, time. We have all the time.
Yeah. I want to say, commend you and your leadership in the many years of managing all of us electeds to accomplish some of the most significant projects we've seen in a couple decades at least, if not longer. Leadership is hard, but we need strong leadership. We need vision to get things accomplished like we have seen. And when we have those kind of victories that people can see and literally drive across and around and through, it makes it, I think, a little bit easier to be able to do that again in the future as they see the value and they're experiencing the benefit. It's not just theory. I mean, you got so many things done, cross that finish line, but there's still more projects that the team has to really work on. So I did want to just kind of try to wrap that up with, there's been a lot of accomplishment through NVTA, NCTPA, the
NVTA.
old days. Yeah. But
Well,
congratulations on that
thank you.
career. Really.
Thank you very
You
much.
should be proud.
Yeah, and I just would say, vision. The community needs vision. So, thanks.
Cheers.
I'll toast to that. Cheers.
Cheers.
But seriously, Alfredo, you've done such an amazing job. I'm going to give you some credit right now to follow up on what we talked about with Kate and Napa Valley Transportation Authority. But you've done so much work regionally that has benefited Napa Valley. Thank you for doing that. And the times that we worked together with Kate, I feel like we really got a lot of really valuable, big ticket projects done. And it took a lot of work, but I'm glad we did it.
You made me a little uncomfortable, and I rarely get uncomfortable, John, right, when you're trying to praise me, but I'm glad it's recorded, because I'm going to play it back every time, right? But look, that's our job, though, John, right? Like, we're in there talking about projects, 63 million or whatever.
52 million.
52 million. We were under budget, but we were in there getting money, right? And it's not to get your name on a bridge or your name, because it was the right thing to do, man. Like
We could get our names on the bridge?
No, you didn't. Or the roundabout, right? If we got a statue, it might get defaced. But the whole point of, that's what it is, though.
Yeah.
Like, talking to Kate reminded me of, when we were out there stumping, right? Not because it was Kate Miller and Pedroza or Dunbar or Canning, or I'm just naming names, but like we were in there in the trenches doing the work. And when I drive by Sausco Junction and I see it work, I do remember the stuff that we did. Not that we need to go sing it and do a presentation with a nice big check like many electeds do. It was our job. And Kate was kind of flirting with kind of that, back in the day, it was like this. It was like that, right? And you and I did a lot of that. And to me, I just hope that as electeds think about that, you're trying to, measure yourself against that, because that was an outcome. It wasn't a hypothetical, it wasn't a hyperbole. It was real stuff that we did for this community.
And one of the things that we highlighted with Kate was the fact that it was a team effort. And we need to, yes, represent our constituents and also the collective Napa Valley, Napa County. Do what's best for all of us, and our own jurisdictions will benefit.
Well, and I'll tell you, Kate and I, we should have talked, we didn't have the best relationship in the beginning. Right, her and I had to have a come to Jesus meeting in jail, I think, because we were not connecting, right? I was doing my thing, she was doing her thing. But it took that maturity of two adults, two professionals saying, hey, we can work against each other or we can work with each other. And that was an intentional effort of, in my opinion, two leaders acknowledging that we're better off working together. Now, we can talk about that now, but it wasn't like we were posting on Facebook, look at us, what we're doing. No, we just did it and we went along our way. And I can tell you, it was one of the best decisions I made, because I was more effective because of Kate. And I would say she was able to do more in her job because of our relationship as well. And that's success.
Can you imagine having to deal with 6 jurisdictions of elected officials sitting around a board of directors table? That was us. And I'm just glad that she was able to take our stuff.
There's a reason why
Keeping it clean.
There's a reason why she drinks. All right, so to that.
For us too.
Cheers.
Cheers.